we're ready.
Record button.
All right, I'm going to call the BDS meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock on November the 6th. All committee members are present. Mr. Matney is via Zoom, and we have our administrator, Mr. Duncan, and the BDS director, Mr. Deerhog. Do we have any public comment? All right. Next, we have reading and approval of minutes. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve as submitted.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Are there any changes or discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in approval say aye.
Aye.
All right. The motion carries. So next we have reports or communications from our city officers. Mr. Deerhog.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, committee members. Give you a brief update from our monthly report last month. We have set a record for the 5th time this year in the number of building inspections we did. We did 2,500 building inspections, which is pretty big if you ask me. We also saw our residential permits and commercial permits stay strong. We did dip a little bit in our residential permits. When I say dip, we weren't as high as we were 2 months ago, which was a record, but we're still up in a high level. Usually we start to see permits tailored down around this time of the year, slow down, but since COVID, that's all been thrown out the window. We're continuing to see consistently high level of permits coming out of our office. In terms of commercial permits, we did issue another 2 permits for businesses coming to Bridgeway Station. That's Belladina's. Oh, hold on, I got the wrong report. Scratch that. That is one new one this last month. That was Stella's. And then we are starting to see some of the businesses in Bridgeway Station open up, or should be starting to see them, including this last month. We issued licenses for Leshik Nails Lounge and Plum, a lifestyle boutique. The month before, we issued license for the Junkyard of Mauldin. So we should start to see a trickle of these businesses beginning to open up out there. One other item I have for you tonight is just to give you an update on the annexation that you may recall that the committee reviewed last time, as well as council last month. This is the annexation on Log Shoals Road. The applicants for that have withdrawn their application for right now. They've cited some challenges with the sewer as well as density. So it's possible we still may see that come back at some point in time, but right now it's a void application since they've withdrawn it. That's a report I have for you tonight.
All right, thank you. Any questions, Mr. Deerhog?
I have none.
All right. Okay, we're going to move on then. There is no unfinished business. We have new business, which is a right-of-way reconfiguration at New Commerce Court.
All right, Madam Chair and committee members, the best way for me to introduce this item is to use some visuals. We're referring to New Commerce Court as shown on the map here that runs between Spinks and Keller Williams Real Estate. And this on the map shows you how that had been constructed and configured as a typical cul-de-sac ending there. We go to our next drawing here. This is how it got redeveloped with the permission of our city staff as they were doing the development for the Parkside at Butler Apartments. Instead of it terminating in a cul-de-sac, we've allowed it to terminate in a T intersection in accordance with the city's land development regulations. And so that right-of-way that's been shaped for a cul-de-sac needs to be updated, and that's where we get into this next slide. This is a survey of that right of way, and what we're showing you here in the yellow and the red is the yellow areas are part of that cul-de-sac right of way that we um, would propose to give to the developer. And the red or pink on this is what's part of the developer's property that they would give to us, so that the right of way now fits that T intersection instead of the old cul-de-sac. So what we're asking you tonight is to recommend approval of an ordinance that's been prepared by Daniel Hughes to this effect that will convey the property in yellow to the developer, and the property in red will come to the city.
Okay, great. Any questions for Mr. Deerhog? All right, hearing none, do I hear a motion?
Move we forward to full council with recommendation for approval.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor say aye.
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 All right, motion carries. So this will go to full council. All right, next we have the
And Madam
discussion-
Chair, just a quick note, I may have to hop off to take care of something before the end of the committee if I happen to suddenly disappear.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Matney. All right, so next is the discussion on the food truck regulations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item's being included on the agenda, as you mentioned, for discussion. We've had questions from time to time about our food truck regulations. Sometimes I think people are of the impression that they are challenging to work with. So we've included this on there for discussion. We've gone through and kind of reviewed our regulations, looked at regulations for a lot of other communities in South Carolina to see how they compare. In a nutshell, as far as how our regulations are, we require permits for events that are hosted on private property if there's going to be, particularly if there's going to be a food truck present. And so the property owner that is hosting that event would get a permit for their event, and then a food truck vendor would come in and get a business license with the city. We find that that's fairly common for many communities throughout the state. They typically do require permits for special events on private property, and they require business licenses for food trucks. One thing, though, that we have noticed in some communities is that there may be a threshold they set where they don't necessarily require a permit for the event. And so at that point, it's just making sure that the food truck gets their business license and other standard requirements. So we wanted to include this for a discussion for y'all tonight to see if you wanted to had any thoughts of making changes to this, whether we change the thresholds for what we require permits for events for, or if there's anything in the actual documentation that we require from food trucks. Right now, some of the documents that they're required to provide, this one's pretty standard, is their DHEC documents. They have to pass a fire inspection. That's also fairly standard for all other communities. Like I mentioned, this is all for the purpose of getting a business license. Typically, they're required to remit their hospitality tax, although we and most other communities have a hard time getting those collections. We haven't lost any sleep over it yet, Seth, right? But we know that we struggle to get that. Some of the things they're supposed to provide is the name and address of their commissary where they prepare the foods, color photograph of the applicant, although we don't always necessarily hold that too tightly. 10-year background check, 10-year driving record. Honestly, we require those things. I don't know what we would ever do with them if they ever came back with certain things in them, because it doesn't say anywhere in our ordinance that, like, for example, if they have a felony, we won't approve them. So we just take that because it says we have to. Copy of the vehicle's registration and insurance, color photographs inside and outside of the vehicle. Again, we're not terrible strict sticklers on that rule, but and then we have some other requirements they're subject to, like they cannot sell beverages containing alcohol. They can't be located within 250 feet of a restaurant unless they have that restaurant's permission. There has to be access to restrooms within 300 feet. They're not allowed to set up within 200 feet of a residence unless they're part of a neighborhood event. Not allowed to operate more than 90 days a year. And then there's hours. They can't set up before 7 a.m. or after 10 p.m. And they have to be at least 15 feet setback from the public right away. So again, all this is for discussion. If there's anything that you have any interest in adjusting, if we do want to make some changes to this ordinance, it would need to go to the planning commission for them to review and provide a recommendation, and then it would come back through the committee and council.
Okay. I think that on the 10-year background check, I noticed one city, I believe it was Sumter. Let's see. And they may be denied for a felony criminal record. But one thing that I think that may be needed is, if the event is at or near a school or an event for children, and maybe we want to review the background check just to make sure that it's safe to be around children. The 10-year driving record, since they're not driving for the city or a city vehicle, I don't know if that's really needed. And the only other comment that I had was food trucks are not allowed to set up within 250 feet of a restaurant without that restaurant's permission. I would think that it would depend on the event that's happening.
Or maybe the duration. For example, if it's just a 1-day dealio, maybe we don't need them to necessarily worry about that. 1 day shouldn't really interfere too much with the restaurant's success, perhaps.
Right, right. Because, I mean, that's gonna happen, I believe, sooner rather than later, but, those were the only changes that I see that I would recommend. You have anything, Mr. Allgood?
Just a couple of comments and then a question. It sounded like as you were reading through it, these 10-year driving records and stuff like that is probably things that can go. It doesn't. It sounds like there's some stuff in there that we're not even. Why we even have it in there? So, right, if there's no reason, I would say let's remove it. I think you make a great point about schools. I would never have thought of that. That's an excellent point. I think if we are going to require a background check, let's do that for if it's near a school, right? So I do agree with that. I like that. But I guess my question is, what are the problems we're trying to solve with this? Do we feel like our ordinance is too strict, too light? You gave a bunch of examples here with other cities from Greenville as far south as Newberry and Aiken. So Florence even. So I'm just curious, did you pick up on anything that you particularly liked or didn't like from other ones? What's your take?
The only thing to answer your first question is we've had a few comments here lately that their impression, like I said, is that our requirements are a little difficult. And I can see where some things like the 10-year driving record, especially if you've not been in South Carolina for the last 10 years, you've got to go chase down your driving record in other states. That's hard sometimes. There are some times too where it gets difficult for the food truck vendor when they're within that 250 feet of a restaurant trying to track down a person that's going to give them permission, and they're just setting up their food truck for a couple of hours. So there are those kind of things. I think sometimes the property owners themselves who are hosting the event kind of question, well, why do I need to get a permit for this event that I'm putting on? One of the biggest ones we're running into recently is the alcohol requirement. We're getting more and more applications where, because now they've got these like mobile wine bars and even mobile beer trucks that folks are interested in having come serve at their event in lieu of the traditional caterer that you might be accustomed to seeing at events. So that one's kind of been getting in the I'll say getting in the way of some of these people trying to put on these events because they want to have alcohol there. But then this kind of precludes a lot of them from having the option of bringing in like a wine bar, a mobile wine bar type of deal. So those are the things that we're hearing rumblings about in our interactions and a little bit in the community, I suppose you could say, although I don't say that to mean that represents the community at large. But the latter question of yours is what would we recommend on that front that other places are doing. I would say I'm intrigued at the possibility of establishing some different thresholds for when a permit is required for the event. And even also, I'm interested in having some standards that may allow these wine bars and beer trucks that serve like a food truck at some of these events, as long as we've got some requirements in there to protect the public from itself. So those are the things that stand out to me. Of course, there may be other things that stand out to other people. I agree. There are some things in the materials they're required to submit we really don't need. It's just busy work and more paper and documents that we have to save over time. So
I'm all in favor with reducing that, just getting that out of there. Do you feel like when you mentioned difficulties with them trying to figure out, okay, can I get in touch with the property owner? Is that because it's 250 feet versus some of these others where it's 100 feet? Some of them are even more than 250 feet, it looks like, but it looks like some of these that you have as examples are more along the lines of 100 feet. So if you're outside of that, if it was dropped to, let's say, 200 as opposed to 250 feet, would that alleviate some of that?
I don't know that the distance is necessarily the magical aspect of that, because I'm not even quite sure where that numbers come from. It may be arbitrary. I don't know. Maybe there's some logic behind it where whether it's 250, 200, 100, whatever, 500, I don't know. But I think to me, the probably other aspect we could look at for this is just how long are they going to be set up? Again, if they're just out there for a couple of hours, I think I've heard sentiment that, that really shouldn't be a big deal. I'm not affecting that restaurant much at all in that short amount of time. So that might be something we take a look at, is to say that if you're within, or if you're, just going to be set up for less than 24 hours or whatever, maybe that permission's not required. I don't know. Maybe we have to take a look at how will that repeat? How often will there be a food truck, on this property or on a property within that distance of a restaurant? Maybe we set limitations on that, or, there's different things we could take a look at there and figure out if that's something we even want to address.
Yeah. I mean, I'd probably go back on the defensive side of our area restaurants. Let's say that it was only 2 or 3 hours. The 2 or 3 hours is at prime time, lunchtime. That's going to be more impactful. There's a reason why Sonic has their happy hour between 2 and 4. It's because that's when they're not very busy. So that's something to consider. I also noticed on here, and I didn't really see it in anything else. I don't think we do have a requirement that you need to be near a restroom facility. I don't know if anybody has had difficulties with that. No.
No, because and I should probably also recommend this too. It might be the type of event that we look at too, where we make some adjustments. A lot of the types of events that we get are not the types of events that you think of what the city puts on. The types of events we see are like grand openings and things of that nature. For example, the South Carolina Federal Credit Union, who just opened up, is maybe they just had it or about to have a grand opening event. They had to work through this issue to get permission from the restaurant managers right all around them, because they want to have 2 food trucks out there during their grand opening event.
Yeah.
The vet practice that's about to open next door, they're working towards this right now too. trying to have a food truck out there as part of their grand opening event. Again, you're talking about an event that's about 2 hours, but they're trying to track down some of these restaurants all that they're within that radius of to get their permission to have the food truck out there that they want to have as part of their event. So, maybe that we take a look even at the type of event we're talking about in these type where it's not like a festival or anything like that,
Mhm.
but it's kind of a more specific focused event like these grand openings might be something we might want to look at.
I think it's an excellent point. I mean, I don't think when you're having a grand opening celebration, which is a once in a lifetime, well, not really, but once every so often, you're actually opening up a building, right? That's different than, hey, I want to put a food truck out on my parking lot every weekend, right? So I think you make all really good points there. I see a lot of things in here with the examples that you provided that I think we might be able to adopt and or make things a little bit simpler than what we've had currently. Um, am I passionate about one thing or another? No, not. And as far as those wine and beer, I mean, I'm open to exploring that too. But just for clarification, when we have Growler out here, that's technically not a food truck.
We're treating them as a caterer. It's a gray
It's
area.
a gray area. Okay. All right. Well, that's all I have. Unless you have anything else.
Well, I do actually, because the wine bar and beer kind of, I guess I'm curious as to how long those kinds of trucks would be at an establishment. Um, and who becomes responsible if someone leaves drunk and there's an accident, then who's responsible for that?
Yeah, so I think what you'll find is in other settings and applications, there's standards that are in place and there's licensings that comes down through the Department of Revenue and so forth that's involved with that. Our police department's even involved with that to an extent of approving applications. So if we wanted to explore this and open up the door, certainly we would want to instill some standards similar to the ones that apply in other settings so that those types of concerns are controlled for. I don't have the answers necessarily right in front of me to say these are the standards we would need to put in, but certainly that should be part of our research to do if we want to explore that.
The other question I have is, do you think that maybe these other cities can get together and find out how to start collecting that hospitality tax?
You have any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a very simple solution for that is one, when the business first registers, the food truck registers with the city, they pay a deposit of $60. And that essentially is the first $3,000 in H sales, hospitality tax sales. So that's one way to do it. And then they remit basically quarterly or semi-annually, depending on how much business they do. But so there's ways we can do that differently than whereas now we set them up with an account, but then depending on the number of events they have in the city, they may not hit that threshold for a while. Whereas if we take a deposit, then they've already set us up to where they're good for the first 3,000. Then after that, they got to remit. So there's things we can do.
Well, how would you know, like throughout the year, because the business license is for a year, correct? So how do you know how often and where in Mauldin they set up? So that maybe the next year when they go to renew their business license, you can say, you didn't pay, so we got to settle up and then we'll renew your business license. But I mean, because you have no control really of knowing where they are, correct?
Yeah, there's definitely an honor system aspect to that. We can't be out there all the time watching and noting every food truck that may stop.
Yeah. Okay. Well, those are the things that I have and concerns I have and what I would change. And Mr. Matney, I guess, had to hop off, so he didn't get to weigh in on this.
But he was very excited that this topic was coming up because he had just recently texted myself saying, "Hey, I'm hearing concerns from businesses in the city who are finding it difficult to navigate, to bring in food trucks for their special events and things like that." So this was a topic of great concern to him. I told him that we might push it to December. He goes, and then I told him we were going to have it this month. He was like, "Excellent, that's fantastic." So I know he's communicated, at least to me, maybe also to David as well, some concerns. But his point is make it flexible and amenable to good business practices, but also at the same time protect the city. So that's that kind of fine line we're walking with this for sure.
Okay.
So here's my question for you all. Would you prefer to hold this in committee and us to bring back some different adjustments that you might take a look at the next committee meeting? Or would you like to just push this to the planning commission and let them kind of wade through that?
Well, I mean, because obviously I haven't heard what other concerns or changes Mr. Matney would like. If that was something that he provided to y'all that could go forward to the planning commission. Because he wanted it on this committee this month.
He wanted it. He was glad to hear that it was happening sooner rather than later. I don't think he's expressed any specific concerns, but other than just make it business friendly and of course protect our brick and mortars as well. So just to relay his and I conversation.
Okay. Well, I don't see any reason why it couldn't go to the planning commission and then let them work on it and bring it back through committee.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Did you have anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Okay. All right, we'll move on to committee concerns.
I have none.
There are none. What do I hear on adjournment?
So moved.
All right, I will second that, and we are adjourned at 6:27 PM.
All right, we'll call our second committee meeting of November 6th to order. Public safety, it is 6:28 PM. All members of committee are present, myself, Mr. Allgood, Mr. Kraling, as well as our police chief, our fire chief, and our clerk of court, and Mr. Duncan, our administrator. The first order would be public comment. Have anyone in the audience? Seeing none, we'll move on to the reading and approval of the minutes from our September 5th meeting. What are committee's pleasure?
Motion to approve as submitted.
Second.
Any corrections, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes from September 5th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, none opposed, motion carries unanimously. Then we'll move right on into the reports. Chief McCone, you're up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee. Actually, we're gonna bring forth or for a discussion item of looking at changing our shift schedule. We currently are a 24/48, so we work 24 on, 48 off. We were approached by our command staff was approached in reference to our staff wanting to go to moving to a 48-96 schedule. That means they'll work 2 days, off 4 days. And give a little background on that, like I said, when they approached us, we established a committee to do that. We done 2 people off each shift, and we had a chairperson to do that. They went out and talked to other departments that's already currently doing the 48-96, brought this information back to command staff. We went through this, and like I said, then we polled it out to the staff personnel, shift personnel. Is 96% wanting to try this trial run for a year of 2024. I gave attachments in y'all's handouts and all that. Y'all have any questions or comments?
So I'll just add to that, it's, I guess, Mr. Duncan and I agree wholeheartedly that this is an administrative, move that would not need to come before council for approval. So that's why it's being brought to us tonight for, pretty much information only, and if anyone on committee has any questions. I had battalion chief approached me last week about it, wanting to know what I thought about, and it's before I talked to Mr. Duncan and to chief, what I thought about 4896. And I just come from work and I thought he was talking about a code section or something. I'm like, what are you talking about, 4896? So, you know, my thing is, and I, again, before I knew anything about it, I told him, I said, you know, that's, to me, is administrative. If it's what the majority wants to try, I've heard this off and on for 8 years now since I've been on council, and why not give it a shot? And if it doesn't work, we can always go back to the 24-48. My only concern, and I've said this many times, is if you're on for 48 straight and we have a major structure fire and our guys are out for an extended amount of time, and ladies, you know, what does that look like the next day if you have a back-to-back event? But in the world of mutual aid, I've been told that it's, and the likelihood of that happening, it would be rare, most likely. So, again, you know, I thank you for the information and for the committee you put together and the research behind it. And that's what 96% wants. Then
I didn't expect that much, to be quite honest.
yeah, I was kind of surprised too,
Yep.
because we're just by nature creatures of habit, and it's always been the 24-48.
Yep.
So, and from what I've been told, I think the 4% that wasn't for it, that's kind of their mentality. Well, I don't know. It's always been 24-48. That's all I know.
Mhm.
So, any questions for Chief McCollum?
No, my only thought would be, when you look at this, is does it affect staffing at all?
Everything stays the same. And one good thing, that's what staff brought back too, is that currently they travel 10 times a month here. By going to this schedule, they travel 5. So they're cutting down, and most of our personnel lives in Spartanburg, Anderson, Lawrence County, and Greenwood. So that will help them out financially also.
Mhm.
I got nothing else.
Good deal.
And just give you an update on the station also.
Yes.
We actually done a punch list back in September. We should be finishing it up this week, getting everything, all the little problems they had and all that. Should be meeting this week, finalize all that. So we're still waiting on South Carolina DOT for the encroachment permit for the fiber. That's what's holding everything up right now.
Well, it looks awesome. And, council members, if y'all have not been out to take your tour, I would encourage you to do so. It's very impressive. So it's exciting
Y'all.
to have that as the entrance into the city on the other side. So thanks, Chief, for that update. All right. Our clerk of court, Mr. Rado. Should have been third, and then you could just stayed in place to come back up. Like,
Good evening.
like Chief Miller likes to do.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Just a couple updates. So this month we did fill our last open spot in judicial. We hired Julie Clardy as our new records clerk. She's doing wonderful so far. She's doing great with training, wanting to jump in and learn as much as she can. She has a lengthy background in customer service. She'd worked for SLED, so she's familiar with a lot of things that go on in court. So we're very happy to have her on board. As far as budget-wise, we are at or higher percentages of where we should be at this point in the fiscal year. The only other thing is we've been talking to the trial judges. We're looking to make some maybe small adjustments in the courtroom, just to make things easier for the judge, public. A lot of times after court, people are a little confused on what's your next step after they leave court. So it kind of gets like that little muck area, like should they go to the window, should they leave? So we're looking to either do some like scrolling messages on the board, kind of reword like what the judge repeats before court, to try to make it a little. So that's pretty much.
Any questions? All right, we'll see you back in a little bit. Next up, we have Chief Miller, and we have our new captain, Clardy, with us tonight in the back.
Yes, ma'am. I had him come tonight in case anybody hadn't met him. He'll be filling in for me if I have to take the night off, which December 4th, my 30th anniversary, so probably. So,
All right, y'all put that on your calendar because we know what happens when Chief's not around.
Ms. King,
Side story. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Chief.
Mr. Fraley, Mr. Allgood, thank you for being here tonight. First of all, I'd like to thank Hollywood Feed and Seed on Woodruff Road for sponsoring the Lynn Hall with our community officers, fire department, and the Explorers helped out. We actually got 3 carloads of supplies to take to Greenville County. Here. Also, as you all know, we had the double homicide last week. The subject was the detectives worked countless hours and actually got him within just a couple of days. They did a phenomenal job, but also with that, Greenville County, Pickens County Forensics Solicitor's Office, the DEU, Judicial, Lauren, with who is our PO for the city, and the coroner's office all came together and did a fantastic job getting, well, I wouldn't say closure of the case. There's still a lot of things to do, but we have gotten to where we have the suspect in jail. The budget's looking pretty good. We're looking good. Overtime's a little low, but.
All right, any questions? And yes, the double homicide, just from beginning to end, what I saw from staff, what I saw from the news media, those officers that were interviewed and with the other departments that helped out, it was just unbelievable that in 2 days you had your guy. So great
Yes.
job for everyone involved.
I was out of town, so
That's why I said, mark your calendar for that December day.
so Captain Hodrea was in charge that week, so he let all the news conferences and stuff. So,
Welcome to Mauldin.
but yes, the department and all the agencies surrounding have.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no unfinished business. And then under the next agenda item, new business is administrative judge appointment. So our clerk of courts back up as promised.
I'm here before you tonight to bring forth the appointment for Judge Brandy White. As you know, we have several part-time administrative judges for us on rotating weekends and when I'm out, holidays and all. We do have an opening when Judge Bonnie Barnett had to put her resignation in, so we have an open spot. We had posted it, and Judge Brandy White had come in. I interviewed her. She has an extensive legal background. She has a master's from Loyola Law School. She worked in the county detention, setting bonds. She was a paralegal, and currently she works full-time for the city of Columbia as an administrative judge. She told me she does about 30 to 40 warrants a day, so I think she's seasoned at it for now. She does live in Greenville County, so time-wise, it's not an issue if she was on call to get here in a timely manner. And she also is in good standing with court administration and the SC bar. As far as fiscal impact, there is none since you get paid when you work, so that money is allotted for. and I would be looking to appoint her through the expiration of the current 2-year appointment term, which I think is about April of 2025. I'm looking to keep all the appointments kind of set and not staggered and keep them all kind of easy to manage. So she would look to fill the current one, and then once that's up.
All right, excellent. You are correct. The experience is, yeah. So to me, it's a no-brainer, but yes, sir.
So I'd like to make a motion to move to full council, appointment of Brandy White as part-time administrative judge.
Thank you, Mr. Kraling. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Don't take them on.
Yep, my mother's gonna have to wait.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously to forward to full council.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. That brings us back around to public comment. Seeing none, hearing none, committee concerns. What do we have on adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Stand adjourned at 6:41. Next committee meeting would be Public Works, Mr. Kraling.
All right, I call to order the Public Works, Committee meeting. It is, what's that? I'm correct, 6:42. See, I have with me Ms. Carol King and Mr. Michael Reynolds, as our city administrator, and Mr. Matt Fleeman as well. All right, first of all, public comment. Public comment or reading and approvals of minutes, what do I hear?
Motion to approve?
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second them.
Any discussion? Okay, those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those like sign, the ayes have it, is approved. All right, let's see. Reports and communications from Mr. Fleeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public Works, we're always busy, doing a lot of stuff, but, the only update I really want to give this month is that, as you're aware, you know, the state through appropriations gave us $1 million for sidewalks. During the past month, the Greenville Legislative Delegation Transportation Committee awarded the city an additional $190,000 in grant funding for this sidewalk project. Like I said, these funds are in addition to the $1 million in state appropriations, and it will provide for 2 sections of sidewalks along Miller Road. First segment will begin corner of Old Mill and Miller. The Greenville County Redevelopment Authority is going to be having a sidewalk extend around their property at the corner of Old Mill and Miller. We will begin where their sidewalk truncates, and we'll run that all the way down to meet the sidewalk on the apartments on Corn Road. On the other side of Corn Road, just north of Middle Road, where the sidewalk ends, we'll be putting in stormwater and sidewalks, and we're going to continue the sidewalks all the way up and truncate them at the Miller Road Fire Station. Part of the grant that we got from the GLDTC provides for Co-Transco to provide engineering and construction management services throughout the project. The agreement from GLDTC, because it will be accepting funds and contracts, will be forthcoming, and I expect it to bring that through committee and council, probably next month.
Exciting news.
Yeah, no, just a comment. Yeah, that's been a long time coming. 8+ years that I'm aware of, and I'm sure it's been longer than that. So super excited about that project, and especially us being able to go to the other side up to the fire department, because that's equally as important to be able to tie in there. So tell your neighbors, Michael, it's happening.
Now they'll only talk about leaves. I'm just kidding.
It is not their week.
When, this does not include any bridge going over the river there. Does. I didn't think that's great. That's really good. There's nothing that makes me squirm more than to see kids walking along there with traffic and they're just kind of oblivious to everybody going around, especially when it's raining. So, thank you.
Nothing to do with their cell phone though.
Yeah, nothing to do with their cell phones. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Fleeman? No. All right, let's move on to, let's see here. There's no unfinished business. New business discussion, a stormwater fee report.
Yes, so what you have before you is an agenda item from the Public Works Department. I guess this is really intended for discussion purposes. You know, back in, was it August or September, KCI wrote the stormwater fee analysis report. We provided that to council. During last month's council meeting, KCI and gave the presentation of their report. You know, the report itself compared 4 like-sized cities with populations and stormwater issues. The report, you know, basically identified that we pay 50% less than the lowest fee of comparable cities. The report made several considerations for determining potential fees. It generated potential alternatives. The alternatives were all in the report, were evaluated. The revenue stream, you know, proposed varied from, you know, $250,000 to $750,000 annually. They broke the revenue stream out in the report based on residential versus non-residential constituents. The report went further on to demonstrate how that money could be used to set up a capital improvement or an enterprise fund for the purposes of stormwater repairs, installations, upgrades, renovations, to address some of the more legacy issues in the older parts of the city. They identified staffing requirements, equipment requirements, what work could be contracted, what staff would be required, how much pipe staff could lay, and then also basically a capital improvement number of years of retained earnings to show how we could tackle some of the larger stormwater issues in the city. So what we're looking at is, you know, we identified that, you know, stormwater is an issue throughout the city. Realistically, stormwater is an issue. Stormwater flooding is an issue in a small subset sections of the city, more of the legacy neighborhoods. We do have a tremendously large stormwater system. You know, in here you have 3,000 catch basins. The average cost of a catch basin is $1,500, $2,000. So you can just start thinking in your mind, how much does it cost to fix that, to replace all those? You know, 58 miles of stormwater. We have 110 miles of sewer. You know, and we know what the sewer budget is. We appropriate approximately $30,000 a year to operate and maintain a stormwater system. I've stretched it as far as I can go. What you guys ultimately have to decide is, do you want to pursue additional funding to expand the stormwater program. And if you do, you know, how you want to go about that, you know, based on the report that KCA provided. I'm available to answer any question you got. I know everything about our stormwater in this system. But I can only provide information. I need you guys to decide.
Mr. Fleeman's in a hurry to be quiet.
So on this, stormwater has been a problem in the city, not gonna go away. And the reason that I think it's more your legacy areas is because of lack of maintenance. And the new city, any of the newer developments, we don't maintain those will become problems in the future for councils down the road. So it's not just a matter of just fixing those legacy areas, but also maintaining what we currently have as well, right? And there is no funding mechanism. I am allergic to taxes. However, in this case, there is no funding mechanism for this. State doesn't do it, the county doesn't do it. You know, we get some grants here and there when we were begging, and we've done a great job doing that. But there has to be a funding mechanism for this, and this has to be a priority for the city. Otherwise, it's just going to get worse. Like I said, I'm generally opposed, but I don't see any other alternative to this. I like the recommendations that you had on here. As far as the funding mechanism, I did have some questions about the potential ways of implementing the VIXs as far as the bonds and staff. Maybe there's a hybrid in there, because doing the bonds to do those fixes without doing the maintenance, as I brought up before, even if it's very small, but at least get that rhythm. And you're already doing some of that now, but make that part of it as well. That's my personal opinion on that. I don't want to just do bonds and then 4 years. Okay, great. Everything's paid off. Now what? This has to be something of a long-term plan, just like we do with sewer, right? And how do we maintain it? How do we keep it? So, I think you've done a really good job here. I'm happy with what KCI has provided. You know, going back at some of the designs that we had for some of the areas. And then since you've been doing the curbs, I think there's maybe some things we may want to think about that may save us some money, or make it where we can do little fixes now. If we can't do it right away, there's some opportunities there. I think you've done a really good job here. So I want to thank you for that. And I think I've let where I stand. I think everyone understands where I come from in this. I'm more than willing to take a beating online, get in line, because this is something that needs to be done.
Chairman, I think first off, nothing we talk about here is going to be implemented next month anyway. So it's one of those things we're trying to be thoughtful for next year's budget, as staff tries to start putting together and saying how much do we want to tackle this year, next year, and beyond. So you only get one small night, I think, of beatings, and it won't be too bad because there's an election tomorrow anyway. So there's plenty of other people to talk about. I think to your point, and Mr. Fleeman's point is, as a council, we got to decide what do we want to do here. This is something we've obviously been dealing with for a while. We can talk about it and rehash over and over. A couple of concerns that I have in thinking about an implementation of a fee. One is, I think KCI has taught us that as big of an issue as we thought it was, the number's probably bigger than we realized. So that's one giant concern for me. On a second thought, going down the same line of there's a certain reality to it technically isn't our problem. Technically speaking, we can say it's the county, it's the et cetera, et cetera. Once we do this, you're inherently taking on that, well, it's now the city's problem. And this may be something Seth and I talked about a little bit, and we would probably disagree a little bit on it. I think the perception is it's now our problem and wholly our problem. So that's another concern I have. I think in thinking about it moving forward, I would be probably more inclined to look at a funding mechanism to balance large grants that Mr. Fleming can get, rather than taking on the entire department and saying, okay, we now have 4, 5, 7 full-time employees. Their entire job day in, day out is this. I would be more inclined to have a place where if we get $1.5 million grant, we can look and say, well, that's not $1.5 million out of general fund or whatever it is. We have a fund set aside. So I think I would be more inclined to consider something like this with that intent. But again, to your point, I appreciate Mr. Fleeman's work, KCI's work, and I do think the council as a whole has shown that there's a willingness and understanding and I think a desire to try to figure out what to do. We're kind of getting to the point where.
And on that, I think we're somewhat aligned there, except for me, it's the maintenance piece. If we don't do the maintenance what we currently have now, we're gonna have bigger problems in the future.
I mean,
Can you speak on that,
Speak
Mr.
on that,
Fleming,
absolutely.
please?
So, when I first started 4 years ago, we conducted zero maintenance. Zero, none.
No place to go but up.
Yes. So, we have over 3,000 catch basins. So in, the last 3 years, we've, now I think we're about 1,500 or 1,800 inspections. Probably 1 out of every 3 has to be rebuilt when we do the inspections. So, we've replaced pipes, we've dealt with collapsed pipes. We've done everything we can do in the right of ways and in the system to basically get our maintenance program to actually meet or exceed what any of the other co-permittees in the county's MS4 are conducting. We do an annual report every year. The last 2 years, we've just destroyed everyone on our numbers. So we are maintaining it. Now, that's not to say there are some things that we can't maintain our way out of. When you look at the new developments like Parkland or Indigo Point, how many catch basins do you think are in Indigo Point?
I would hope 40 or 50.
How about like 250? Okay, so that's the size of that development. Parkland's very small, 100 and some catch basins, amount of pipe. You look at Pine Forest, you look at Glendale. Now, how many catch basins are in Pine Forest? 8. How many catch basins are in Glendale? We can't maintain our way out of the fact that some neighborhoods were designed before there were standards and specifications for properly operating stormwater systems. And so when we talk about flooding, and they do happen to be in these neighborhoods where they don't have a functioning stormwater system, there is no maintaining our way out of it. You literally have to go back to ground zero and be like, we have to fix this. Like when KCI gave us the design for Bishop Heights. Design for Bishop Heights was to go in and pour curb and gutter throughout the entire neighborhood, put in a piping network, catch basins, and an outfall. And that was, 2-3 years ago now, and that price was $2 million. It's probably $5 million today. You start talking, and Bishop Heights is a small neighborhood. You start expanding that kind of cost across Glendale, Pine Forest, Forester Woods. You're looking in a very, very large financial undertaking.
When I was mentioning about the maintenance, I think about with Bishop Heights, there used to be ditches there that did at least take some of the water. Not saying it's the perfect thing. Now they mow on them, right? They're flat. So those are the things where I'm saying that we're not maintained. And if we don't it's just like any system. You don't maintain it, it will eventually go back the way it was.
Mr. Chairman, something I wanted to add to Mr. Fleeman's point that you asked in the last council meeting was, well, what if we take over the entire MS4 by ourselves? Unfortunately, that's not really a tenable feat at this point. And so Matthew, can you?
Yeah, I ran some numbers on this, and
yeah,
when you got to remember that a stormwater comes out of the Clean Water Act, the US EPA. Stormwater is not about volume or quantity. Stormwater is about quality. It matters to what is going into that creek that's going downhill and is going to serve as somebody's drinking water in the next town over, right? They don't care how much, they care what's in it. So like a properly operating stormwater program has a lot of sampling, monitoring, education and outreach. It has very little to do with, is my pipe big enough? The only time you see that is in the construction, construction BMPs for construction stormwater. Now, if we were to take the program out as a whole, we couldn't be a small MS4. They don't allow backsliding, in the state. Federal government doesn't like it as well. So we'd be a medium MS4. We'd be on the hook for all the, construction permitting, construction inspection for construction BMPs. We have to have an engineer on staff to review the stormwater modeling. We would have to have construction site inspectors. We would also have to have field staff for sampling. When you start talking about government bloat, like this is government bloat, right? We could do it. We certainly could charge people and do it, but like, it doesn't get you anywhere else.
What I think he is also trying to say, it's not so much that it's government bloat, it's just that when we partner with our other co-permittees, there's a cost savings by the fact that we're all contributing. But this means that for our program here in the city, it's really focusing on the maintenance aspect. So I just wanted to circle back around because you did ask the question. I wanted to make sure you heard kind of why we thought staying as a co-permittee with Greenville County is more advantageous to us than separating. Even though they are collecting about 700,000, we could not generate enough cost savings from operations to justify that change. We'd actually still have to go up on the current.
And that was a question I wanted to answer.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
is it, they getting 700,000, we could do it for 400. We would make, and if we can't, then we can't. That was the question I was answering.
Just salaries alone is north of 400,000. Then you have insurances, you have vehicles, fuel, uniforms, computers. I mean, when you get down to it, we can do it. Still not fixing
You have answered the question.
And tonight our focus was really just to continue this ball rolling of this conversation because we've had the report's been completed. We wanted to make sure the committee had it and then start talking about, is there aspects of what's in the report that you'd like for us to go back and examine? Like I know the 5 options they gave us, it's great from the conceptual standpoint, but what does that mean from a taxpayer standpoint, from a resident, and for our businesses? Because each of those options affects those two populations very differently. And so I think, we're not looking for any type of decision tonight, but really what more can we provide you in your decision-making process to figure out what it is might be the best direction for this. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kraling. So, Mr. Duncan hit on one of my points and one of my concerns, and I tend to agree with a lot of what Mr. Reynolds said, but, the residential versus the commercial fee and the impact. And Mauldin has worked so hard for so long to get a better reputation with our businesses and to recruit businesses in. And when they'll potentially be hit with double what a resident, probably more than that, if you look at the chart. So that's concerning, based off of the information that we have, what the residential rate versus the commercial rate is. We definitely do not want to run people out of town because of that. And because they're already paying Greenville County, and then they'll have this on in addition to that. I'm not concerned about a fee residential, $25 for most folks isn't that big of a deal, but how far is that going to go in the big scheme of things? To your point as well, and this is going to be an unpopular comment, but you're right, it's those older neighborhoods that are impacted. So being the devil's advocate, should all be penalized for a few? I don't know. It's a question I think that we need to think about. And then the third thing, to kind of wrap all of that together, I think we definitely need to sit on this in committee for a while and massage it and talk to other council members. But if this committee decides to do something with this study, I think it would be, and Mr. Duncan and I spoke about this last week, extremely important to have public input from our residents, have some, if we get to that point to where, yeah, we feel comfortable with what we have, we feel comfortable with the residential fees, the commercial fees, this is something we want to tackle. I just really feel like we need to have some workshops, for the lack of a better term, to have, invite our residents out to see what we're talking about and hear what they have to say. Because, so far I don't know, what, a couple of dozen people compared to 25,000 people plus in the city. So again, just some food for thought. And I've said from the beginning, it worries me because it's a bottomless pit, money pit situation. So how much could we actually achieve? And these are the ugly words that nobody wants to talk about, but with the money that we're able to collect with these additional fees, what does that mean? I mean, I'm not seeing we're getting a whole lot of bang for the buck, and we're looking at 3 projects, and the third one being 11 plus years out if we make a decision today. So it's not easy. It's very difficult, but I think these are all things that we need to think about moving forward.
One thing I'd like to interject, I included that percentage in there about the non-residential. When you go to BASF, when you go to CF Sour, when you go to Compex, they all have pre-treatment programs. And every bit of stormwater on those sites is contained, sent through their pre-treatment, and is not discharged as stormwater. It comes through our sewer system. They pay us for transport through the sewer system. So when we talk about the stormwater issues in the city, the issues we have are residential. And having people who do everything right to pay for an issue that's not theirs. I just wanted to bring that to light. And that's the reason I included that.
No, thank you. And to your point, that's what I was trying to highlight there, that it is residential, not commercial, but they're the ones that would be hit with a huge impact fee.
Yeah, no, and I think this is, Mr. Chairman. Please. Thank you. And this very well may be an issue that a new mayor and new council get to talk about in January or February's goal setting and things like that. But I do appreciate, again, KCI's work, your work. And I think it's going to strictly come down to, there's a general consensus that need to do something. What that is, I don't know. I think it's probably somewhere in this packet, some variation of it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may propose an idea, what we could do at the staff level is take this report, the scenarios presented, and game them out and talk about what's the impact to our residents, what's the impact to the business community, and even taking like the largest 5 surface, ERUs on the business side and what those different impacts could be. Model those out for the committee, and then also include to the Councilwoman King's point, some sort of workshop idea and a workshop plan. If that's a committee to engage the public and say, hey, this is something that we're considering. The committee wants your feedback. Yeah, come up with plans and ideas and then bring those back for how we continue to evolving this discussion.
So when I first came to council, there was this push. We don't want to touch this. We don't want to touch it. We can't do it. It's a money pit. Nobody wants to touch this. Ask the question, okay, what's county going to do? Nothing. What's state going to do? Nothing. We got some federal money. There is nobody else that's going to address this. We're stuck with it. Right or wrong, people depend on us. Okay? So I'll make sure that when we're doing this, and I think we're all in agreement that this has to be we have to do something here. I think some of this is neglect because of that reason nobody wanted to touch it all along. The older neighborhoods before the city even existed, even some that came after, we're not gonna maintain it, because once we start, we gotta own it all. I heard that too. Once we do one little thing, we own it all. Don't wanna touch it, don't touch it. Well, we've touched it. And as far as I'm concerned, we somewhat own this. So we have to come up with a solution for a betterment. We may not ever have a real solution. We can make life better. When you have somebody come in and their house is getting flooded, and some of it just bad luck. They bought a house, didn't realize it, the way the water went in and everything else. It breaks your heart when everybody's water's rushing down into their house, right? And they didn't know it. They're stuck with it. It's just bad luck. I understand it, but it doesn't mean it's right either. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear where I stand, that we got to do something on this. And I like the idea of gaming it. I was thinking of something along those lines. What does this really mean? What's it mean to Sour, Dukes, right? What does that really mean to them? The individual, it's pretty straightforward, 25 to 28 bucks, right? What does this really look like? And as far as, going to the public on this, we have to let them know, hey, this isn't being done by anybody, and there are citizens here that are being hurt by it. And if still nothing happens, you may be hurt from it in the future. So I get off my soapbox a little bit, but that's where I stand on
Can I
this.
ask
Well,
you,
Mr.
while I game this out, would you be amenable? Because I know that we always try to do most we can for the least amount to our residents here in the city.
There's some MacGyvering going on.
This is our model. But I do the math. I know the numbers. When we start talking about $25 per resident, $225,000 a year. That's not enough to get anything done, right? We're talking about residential. When I work this all out, would you be amenable to let me present an option where residents actually pay more?
Multiple options.
Right.
If you go and say, I don't think 25, I don't think it's going to kill anybody. 35 may not either.
Oh, it's more like 50 to 75.
I understand, but you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
There's some, how that mix looks. Be creative, bake sales. I don't care. Whatever it takes, but what can we do that? Okay.
With doing that, that would be one of the models excluding the commercial component. Yes.
Or industrial at least.
Industrial commercials, this group. Yes.
Those fees that yes, thank you.
Well, and to your point, Mr. Crayling, real quickly, I think nobody wanted to touch it, but we're still, the council's committed $1.5 million just within the last 3 months. So there's certainly an understanding that we may not have the responsibility, but we're gonna do everything that we can as representatives to help those in need, or help those who through no act of their own are in a bad situation in legacy areas, which, frankly, there wouldn't be all the new growth in Mauldin without great legacy areas. So, as I look at Planners Row or all the different subdivisions that have come, a lot of those came after, to your point, to EPA 91, whenever that law passed. But much of what made Mauldin attractive was the legacy areas. So I think the council's doing what it can, and certainly looking for ways to continue and improve that. So, and that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I do look also, when we talked about, some of the newer neighborhoods may not have as big of issues, and we're paying for some or not the other. Some of those ones are the ones that paid for this building we're sitting in right now. There are things that the older neighborhoods did pay for, that did create where we're at now. So it's not just looking forward, we have to look in the past too. Thank you.
Just one last thing. So as you bring those different scenarios back to us, and we'll be entering into a new year with goal setting, I think this needs to be a part of that conversation prior to engaging the public and getting all of council's input and, feedback with direction back to this committee. Because to your point, yes, I don't think there's anyone on this council who says, no, I don't want to help. I don't want to remedy the situation, but we also have to be realistic about numbers and how we're going to get there and how long it's going to take us to get there. That's all I got. Thank you, Mr. Crayling.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, actually. All right. Anything else, Ms. Freeman? Can't wait to sit down. All right, any public comment? Right, committee concerns. All right, what do I hear on adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.
Next up is Finance and Policy, fourth and final committee meeting of the evening. I'll go ahead and call this Finance and Policy meeting to order. Date is November 6th. This is the fourth committee meeting. The time is 7:15. Members present are Michael Reynolds, Ms. Carol King, and Ms. Diane Kuznar, as well as our seat administrator, Mr. Seth Duncan, and Ms. Abercrombie and Mark Putnam are also joining us in chambers. First item is called order. Second item is going to be public comment. Seeing no public running to the microphone and none online. Thank you. Next item is going to be the reading and approval of minutes. These are for the Finance Committee minutes dated October 2nd, 2023. They're in your packet. What do I hear on those?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
I have a motion to approve the minutes as submitted. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. It carries unanimous. Next item is going to be reports and communications from city officers. Our first officer up is Mr. Seth Duncan, our city administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members on the committee tonight. So just two quick things for everyone. If you didn't know, election day is tomorrow. So if you are a registered voter in the city of Mauldin, please turn out to vote between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. There are 4 seats, including the mayor, seat 2, 4, and 6 on the ballot. And the second thing I have is on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. at the Veterans, the Cultural Center grounds, the Veterans Memorial. We will be hosting a Veterans Day ceremony, and our keynote speaker is Mayor Terry Merritt. And so we hope everyone can come out and join us for that. Program should be about an hour. It should be a great show.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Duncan, for that gentle reminder to get out and vote. Next up is Miss Holly Abercrombie, our finance director.
Good evening, council members. Yes, I'll keep it short and sweet. Overall budgets for the city look good for this point in time. We are finalizing the audit. I'm hoping that by the end of this week, I'm going to push them for by the end of this week, but it may be early next week. We'll have a draft for y'all, and then they'll be here to present on council night the final audit. And that's all I have.
Any questions for Ms. Abercrombie? Hearing none. Thank you, Ms. Abercrombie. Last director present is going to be HR, Mr. Mark Putnam.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I wanted to let you know that today was the first day of open enrollment for the city of Mauldin. As we've talked before, much earlier than we've done it in past years, and knock on wood, I hope I'm not jinxing myself, but it went very smoothly today. And we're hoping that it'll go that way for the next 2 days and have that out of the way. Also want to let this committee know and all council members that we will have a Christmas lunch on Wednesday, December the 13th at 11:30, and we'll be at the senior center, and everybody's invited. We'd like to get as many of y'all as possible to attend.
Make sure Ms. Miller sends out the calendar invite, and those of us who can make it will certainly be there. Thank you for that heads up. Any questions for Mr. Putnam? All right, moving on. There is no unfinished business, so our first item in new business is going to be the FLSA policy. Mr. Putnam, don't go too far. We are all anxiously awaiting and exciting to hear this update.
All right, as you may know that the city had been operating under an Fair Labor Standard Act policy that was from May of 2011. There had been some discussion on it back in August of 2017, right before I got here, but no changes were made. And under the current policy, comp time is allowed to accumulate for overtime instead of overtime. And that is creating a liability that the city's going to have to pay at some point. I remember when I first got here, comp time for me, coming from, the private sector, was foreign to me. If you worked overtime, you got paid overtime. And that's what we're trying to rectify in this policy. The policy we had was very cumbersome at best. It had a lot of parts in it that, in our opinion, did not need to be in the policy. Also ran that through our labor attorney just to make sure that we weren't missing something. And those parts were, it had on-call time, training time, travel time, sleep time, meal periods, rest breaks, and substitutions. That we're going to, be moving into, the employee handbook. And just to give you a background on that, the employee handbook, and I'm looking at Ms. King right now, believe it or not, is coming up on 4 years that we did that. So it is time to dust that off, just to make sure we need to add some things, maybe do some rewording and stuff like that. So that's where we would.
Only took 4 years to do it, right, Mayor?
I actually had hair when we started that, and it, but also that,
The mayor's hair was black.
yeah, that's it. The, new policy also it eliminates comp time, and the city would be paying overtime. And then, the police officers currently are now, bringing in 6 hours of comp time a pay period. They would be, would be receiving straight time for 86 hours, and anything over 86 hours in a pay period, they would receive overtime. And that is, in standard with the Fair Labor Standard Act. And also in our old, policy, it did not list out what was and exempt. The new policy has that, and we vetted all of that through Evergreen, Solutions, just to make sure we weren't missing something, and the labor attorney. And so that's the way those are.
It is typically, in my experience dealing with ballooning governments, and when you eliminate words, you're doing a good thing. So eliminating a bunch of words from this policy is good to me because it makes it much cleaner, easier, to understand and implement. Questions, comments, concerns?
And I will say
Yes.
the old policy, looking up something was very difficult because you had to maybe go through some different things to find out what you were looking for. This one, it will be a lot simpler.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to forward to full council, the recommendation for approval of the updated FLSA and overtime policy as presented to us tonight.
Thank you, Ms. King. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to forward to full council. Did I hear with a recommendation of approval?
Yes.
With a recommendation of approval, the FLSA policy as presented. Any discussion? So I think the only thing I would add to it, Mr. Putnam, and this may be a Ms. King question. As we're looking at, once this comp time is paid out, as we know, the number actually ended up being slightly less than what we were thinking it was going to be.
Yes, sir. As of the last payroll is at 408,000, which was less than the 425. We believe that even with the current payroll or the payrolls that will still, happen between now and the execution date, that will still stay under that 425.
Thinking of it strictly from a point of view of an employee who may have been planning his taxes one way for the entire year, is there a way to break that into 2 fiscal years? Or once we make the policy change, if we have to pay the entire amount out in that policy year, does that make sense?
It does make sense, sir. We haven't heard any of those concerns. We did hear from a few police officers who had asked, could they hold on to a little bit just to use it for a planned vacation or something that they had coming up. We said that we would look at that on a case by case basis, but under no circumstances would anyone be carrying anything past this fiscal year. So if we did allow someone to keep up to maybe a maximum of 40 comp time hours to be utilized, it would have to be utilized by June 1st. And if not, it would be paid out no matter what that balance is. But we anticipate the bulk of everyone taking it at the first opportunity, which is in this tax year.
Thank you, Ms. King.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. So to clarify, that's some are requesting to keep their hours to take before versus being paid out.
Yes, ma'am. And it's
Okay.
really just a few. And we said that we would cap that at 40 hours, that they could not hold on to any more than 40, must be utilized by June 1st. And if not, will be paid out on the next check or the last check of the fiscal year. But only a handful, I'd say 2 or 3
at three at the most.
Three at the most.
I would advise cleaning it up, cutting the checks and moving on.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I was going. I wanted it to be a clean break. I was actually, the reason I was thinking of it was for that very reason right there, is to not have too much of a tax burden from an employee standpoint. And this year, if we could split it into two payments, be half this year, half next year. But I may be making that, again, too many words and making it much more confusing than it needs to be.
No, you asked the question that we asked and we're talking about internally. Would this affect anyone negatively from a tax perspective? Or if they were receiving some sort of other benefit?
That's right.
Student loan repayment
That's right.
based on income-based repayment?
That's right.
Would this affect them negatively? We've not heard from anyone in particular that this was not something that they wanted to do. Just that they had a planned vacation, we're going to take it, and may not have had the same amount of offset of annual leave available to do the same thing. That was the only concern we heard.
Any other discussion? All right, I have a motion and a second for this item before the full council. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimous. That'll be on the next council meeting. December, what is that meeting? 8th? November, sorry. I'm still in the right year. That's a good thing. All right. Thank you, Mr. Putnam. Next item is going to be for city holidays. This is in your packet as well, and this will be something from Mr. Putnam as well. You want to give us a brief overview, Mr. Putnam?
I'd like to first drop back and talk about the foresight and the leadership that this committee had, and also our council when several months ago we adopted the new wage and comp class, and we bumped everybody up. By doing that, we are attracting some unbelievable talent to the city that is now giving us some experience in areas that we have been lacking that in police. We are now seeing, I'm actually fielding calls from HR directors from municipalities around the upstate. And it's not a real pleasant one when I have it, because we're taking this one from Anderson or here or there. But for me, I like it. And we started to take a look at how can we now not only attract that talent, because that's what we're doing now, but also retain them. And so we're looking at our total compensation package, and one of them is the holidays. And to make it more where our employees feel inclusive and everything, we're looking at adding Juneteenth, taking away the floater and moving it to New Year's Eve, giving us 13 holidays. And I know when you look at your breakout here, we would be, for the most part, ahead of the municipalities around us other than the state. But we feel like that's where we need to be. We need to be an employer of choice for municipalities and government workers in the upstate. And to do that, we need to take a step forward. We've not moved or not changed our holiday schedule for over a decade. And we've been just talking about dusting things off and what does it mean. There's a new generation out there that we're bringing in, that we're recruiting, and they look at things a little bit different than certainly someone my age. And that's where we'd like for you to take a look at that. And we'll open to any questions.
All right, this is on. What do I hear? Questions, comments, concerns? Ms. King?
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I must have had that look on my face. So, I don't know. I'm a little torn because I can remember, when I was a state employee, and, I mean, it's been many moons ago, but as I recall, at one point in time, we had a floating holiday, and I don't remember ever having Good Friday. But anyway, they took the floating away and added two holidays with Martin Luther King. That shows you how long ago it's been. It's been probably 20 years, and the Confederate Memorial Day. So I've personally experienced having a floating and having it taken away. It really didn't affect me that much because, you know, you had most of the not quite all the banking holidays, but, the day before Christmas and the day after Christmas, et cetera. So, and I understand in talking with Mr. Putnam that, and to reiterate what he just said, we are recruiting at a level that we have not seen in many, many years. I know we are down to a small amount of police officer vacancies at this time, which we have not seen in many, many years. So, you know, this is a part of the whole package in recruiting young folks because they do compare from municipality to municipality. We've seen them jump ship for $1,000 raise. So, you know, with that being said, I'd like to, I'm not really, I guess where my struggle is do we leave the floating and maybe not have New Year's Eve? I don't know. So I'm anxious to see what other members of committee have to say on this.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. King. I'll jump in if you have comments, Ms. Kuzma.
Well, just in reading the information, it looks like that is going to become maybe a federal holiday at some point. And I don't personally see a problem with it, having it in there. This way, I mean, I know a floating holiday is just whenever someone wants to take a day off. So this way they just know when their holidays are, and I don't know that it would really make any difference because, you know, they do have vacation time.
Thank you, Ms. Kustar. Yeah, I think as I consider this, it's one where I think retention's important, recruitment's important. This council, I think, has shown that there's a conscious effort to trying to get and maintain and keep great employees. This is one of the things that I actually like about the floating holiday schedule is its flexibility to not boxing in a certain type of employee. So when I look at it, you know, we have Judeo-Christian values in the South, so you get Christmas and Christmas Eve. I happen to love that. But Hanukkah's not on there. Yom Kippur, name someone much more educated than me can probably name a bunch more. But as I look at it, I like the flexibility of being able to broadly expand the type of employment we're getting. And part of that is having the flexible holiday schedule. So certainly not inherently against it, but I like the idea of having some flexibility within our schedule as well. You know, as this goes, we would be adding 2 fixed and taking away 1 floating. Okay.
And that was just a recommendation, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of give you a little bit of a backstory on how we came to that idea. The discussion initially was, should we add Juneteenth? And I think that was a quick and easy, yes, that's a recommendation we can make to council pretty easily. The question then became, are we satisfied, happy with the floating holiday, or should we peg that to a fixed date? And when we talked about it at the staff level, it was more of a half the folks were like, I always forget I have it until I take it. And I usually take it on New Year's. Talked about, should we go more towards the state and affix it to President's Day or something to that? I don't think that universally there's a one way to do that. We could still keep the floating holiday as you said, it could be then used for, a lot of people like to use it for their birthdays. Could be for other religious observances or cultural observances, but I think there was definitely universal agreement on the idea of the Juneteenth, adding Juneteenth to recognize that now federal holiday. And so I think if we left the floating holiday, that would be perfectly fine too. I don't think anyone would be rebuffed by that.
So would that mean you would take New Year's Eve off?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. We would just preserve the floating holiday and then just add Juneteenth as a city observed holiday.
One, I think as staff has brought this to us, is to Mr. Duncan's point, for us to discuss and move forward or sit on until next committee. I think it's just one of those, if we have thoughts or have someone willing to make a recommendation,
Well, I'd make a motion to forward the holiday schedule adjustment to full council for maybe further discussion. See what everyone thinks.
Okay, I have a motion to forward to full council for more discussion, the holiday schedule presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second for discussion,
Have
possible amendment.
Second for discussion.
So what would committee think of, forwarding to council for discussion and possible action with a set schedule? I'm kind of more in favor of just adding, the Juneteenth and leaving everything else the same. That would be my personal recommendation. But if we just want to send it to council for a discussion,
Does that fall in more in line with what you were thinking as well? Just add Juneteenth.
Yeah, I mean, the floating holiday is fun.
All right. Would you like to make that in the form of a motion to amend Ms. Kuznar's motion?
you okay with that? Yeah. Okay. Yes. So to amend Ms. Kuznar's motion, or to add to, I guess that is an amendment. I think this is, anyway, to forward to full council the 2024 holiday schedule to include Juneteenth and to continue with the floating holiday for discussion and possible action item.
Thank you, Ms. King.
I think, yes, sir.
Do I have a second on Ms. King's?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the amended motion? Yes.
I do have a question. So what if everybody wants to take off New Year's Eve?
They
There's
would,
nobody here.
they would need to use a floater, and then based on the manning of that department, it'd be, how many can you allow off for that Christmas Eve? New Year's Eve.
Okay, but then I was gonna say, then you're at the end of the year, but you're not, I guess. It's the physical year.
Well, in that case, going back, if everyone tries to use their floating for that day, that would just be up to each department head or supervisor to say, no, pick a different day to use your floating because you can't use it.
And that rarely happens that a lot of people pick that same day.
And then there's the odd chance that they don't use it into the calendar, they just lose it.
That is
Kind of like how annual leave accrues to a certain point, and if you don't use it by July, then you lose the overage. Very similar.
And that was one of our thinkings also, that a lot of folks, take me for instance, I have not used it yet because I forget about it. And we were just trying to make it where it's regimented, where you would take your time off, because we feel like, and we've had that discussion, Mr. Duncan and I have, that, you need to take your time off. Don't have a, badge of honor saying I never take off.
Thank you, Ms. Yes.
Well, and to add to that, I think it's, in looking at this, no other municipality, county, state, federal listed on the chart has a floating, but they don't have New Year's Eve either.
Mhm. Correct.
So with a floating, to Mr. Reynolds' point, if someone has another particular day, whether it's a religious holiday or a birthday, or if they just want to tack on a day for a vacation because they don't have enough annual leave, then they have that option. We have all the other traditional holidays in there. So that's just my take for keeping the floating.
Thank you, Ms. King. Thank you, Mr. Putnam, and Ms. Kuznar as well. I have a motion and a second to forward to full council with recommendation to adopt the holiday schedule, adding Juneteenth to the city's annual holiday schedule. That is, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. All in favor, it's unanimous. All right. Thank you, Mr. Putnam, for your hard work on that. That's one of those items that I think, without being in the thick of it and just doing your job and doing it well, council wouldn't be adept to being able to find, to know that's a great way to recruit. So thank you, Mr. Putnam. Last item we have is Green Link route funding. Mr. Dunn.
Mr. Reynolds, I think there's a problem with the way we did the motion. Yes, she has to, she has to,
Okay, I'll rescind my
thank
motion.
you.
Thank you. All right, so I'd like to, since the motion is presented, as amended from Ms. King, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, Mr. Mayor Merritt. We don't often have to deal with that problem in committee level, do we? Next item, moving on from the agenda, is going to be the Green Link route funding. Mr. Duncan, I assume you're going to take this for us?
This is me tonight, sir. Yes, sir. So tonight we have a funding consideration for next fiscal year's budget for Greenville Transit Authority, the Green Link Route 601, in the amount of $54,000, continue operating the route that serves the city of Mauldin. Greenville Transit Authority currently operates 3 routes in this Mauldin-Simpsonville urbanized area, with 2 of these routes serving the city of Mauldin. Greenlink provides bus service to the city of Mauldin and Simpsonville via routes 501 and 601. Each route operates on a 1-hour rotation Monday through Friday. The total annual cost to operate the Mauldin-Simpsonville routes costs approximately $2 million, with federal government subsidizing about 75% of that cost. The balance of the cost has been paid from a combination of fares, state funding, and joint funding by the city of Greenville and Greenville County. Well, as of this year, Greenville City no longer wishes to subsidize this route, which serves primarily Mauldin and Simpsonville, although it does connect to Greenville as well. And GTA is therefore asking for financial participation by the city of Mauldin and the city of Simpsonville to split that share that the city of Greenville had been contributing. The GTA requests that the city of Mauldin commit to $54,000 and that the city of Simpsonville provides $47,000 for FY25 operations. So this would not be until July 1st. Based on the ridership data that we have received, approximately 11,171 rides have been taken on 601 connector through July 2023. This rate is on pace to well exceed the total ridership from 2022, which was just over 16,000 rides. Per the information provided by Greenville Transit Authority, Simpsonville's connector route 601 will no longer be subsidized by the city of Greenville starting next fiscal year. If the $101,000 in funding is not secured, the route will discontinue service on July 1st or June 30th, technically. GTA has asked both municipalities to respond by February 28th, 2024 regarding their decision to participate. And in conversation with both the mayor and administrator in Simpsonville, they believe that they'll take this up in January. They have an election going on tomorrow as well, and they have a lot more seats that are going to turn over in that election, so they wanted to wait till January before they make a decision. And so for the staff recommendation is that it is something that we can absorb for next year's budget. We can go ahead and plan for it, contingent upon Simpsonville participating in the program as well. And that's my recommendation.
Mr. Duncan, that would be my first concern as well if they're not taking it up until January. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Ms. King.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to go ahead and make the motion, for sake of, discussion if needed, to forward to full council the recommendation to fund the Green Link route for the fiscal year 2025 in the amount of $54,000 contingent on the participation from the city of Simpsonville.
Thank you, Ms. King. I have a motion to forward to full council with a recommendation of approval, the packet before you. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Okay, further discussion on this item? I think it's fairly self-explanatory. This is one that I think it's important, long-term, short-term.
Absolutely.
You know, as we're recruiting from businesses, recruiting, certainly giving a route, giving an opportunity for those who are not as well off as others within the city to have work as well, or to travel from other cities and come into us. So I think it's something that this councilman in general and specifically would be in favor of. And I think it's an important asset to the city.
Public transport is very important. and even for people who own vehicles, there's so much traffic these days that if you could take the bus, to wherever it is that you're going, it's just, I think the problem I had with Greenlink is because they didn't reach out far enough. And I think they would have more ridership if they could, somehow get to more places in a timely fashion. But it's definitely something that's needed and has been needed for a long time. So yeah, I'm definitely for it.
Thank you, Ms. Kuznar. I think following that up, one thing, just what can typically happen in government is things wait till the last minute and then it gets dumped in your lap. Something I can appreciate from GTA on this is giving us plenty of time before our budget to talk about, discuss, and decide as a city if it's a path that makes good sense for us. So this is, again, not something that needs to actually be responded to until January or February, but I just appreciate that kind of timeline from GTA. So certainly express that appreciation from this council. Anything else? All right, what do I hear them on the motion as presented? I have a second. I have discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. All those opposed say no. Nobody's opposed. Carries unanimously forward to full council. The recommendation of approval. Thank you, Ms. King. Thank you, Ms. Kuznar, and thank you, Mr. Duncan, for bringing that to our attention quickly and giving us a chance to show this council's willingness to commit to good service in the city. Next item is going to be public comment. Hearing and seeing none. Oh. Not the fiscal. So you're blaming the HR director. Yep. On the Okay.
Thank you, Holly. I didn't realize that. Did not know that.
Okay. Okay, next item is committee concerns. Hearing and seeing none, what do I hear on adjournment?
So moved.
A motion, have a second. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimous. The time is 7:47, and that is the last committee meeting of the night. We have a special called council meeting. I don't know about